What is up, you guys? I hope that this episode finds you healthy and well. Today, I am talking all about getting out of your rut. I have found myself in a rut at several points in my life. Maybe you have too. Maybe you are even in a rut right now. And I think that it's worthwhile talking about what we can do to get out of it. In this episode, I share some of my personal experience with what it was like for me to be in a rut, and then I share a little theory that I have and this link that I have found between this neurochemical called dopamine and what it feels like to be in a rut. And so I get to talk a little bit of science, which is always a good day because I don't get to do that a lot on this platform. However, even if you're not into the science and even if that doesn't really float your boat, I actually do talk about 6 very practical things that you can do that are healthy ways to get out of your rut that are not eating or drinking yourself into oblivion or shopping and then finding yourself with buyer's remorse later. So I hope you guys get a lot out of this episode, and without further ado, welcome to the Get Out of Your Head podcast, where we talk all about the stories that keep you stuck, blocked from manifesting what you really want, and away from your authentic life. I am your host, Sarah, from Spirit, Mind, Body. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am excited to have you here with me today. Today, I am talking about what to do when you're in a rut and how to get out of it. And I kind of dive a little into some science topics, which is actually pretty exciting. If you don't know, I have a background in biochemistry, and so typically when I get to talk a little bit about biology or biochemistry or like the science behind things, I get really excited about it. I'm a total nerd at heart. And so I talk a lot about this molecule in your brain called dopamine. There may or may not be a link to dopamine and being in a rut. I don't have exact evidence to support it, but what I can tell you is that I've drawn a lot of conclusions and there seems to be a definite correlation. So some of this might be, my own theory. Some of it is actual science. I would say that if you're interested in it, there's a book you could check out. It's called The Molecule of More. I don't know who it's by, but it talks all about dopamine. But anyway, we're going to talk about what it feels like when you're in a rut. I think I entered like my first real rut when I was right outside of college. So I've talked about this experience before. I was working at a manufacturing company, and this was just a job that was totally not in alignment. You know, those things that you do, and sometimes you tell yourself, I'm never going to do that, or that is not for me. And then somebody makes you an offer and your ego's like, yeah, well, that seems like a good amount of money. And that's a good amount of vacation. And so you take the job anyway, even though you promised yourself, I would never do this. I knew it wasn't in alignment. It was a great learning experience. I'm glad I had it. I wouldn't take it back for the world. But during the time, I was in a total rut. Every day I would wake up and I would go to work at 6 a.m. and I'd get off at 2 and I would go to sleep and I would wake up and do the same thing over and over again. It felt like my life was on total repeat. I had nothing to look forward to. It was over and over and over again. I was looking like anything that was kind of exciting was mediocre and short-lasting, like a trip, getting something new. I guess for me, it was a lot of money at the time. But looking back in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a ton of money. And so I bought a car and I was like, oh, I'm so excited about this. And then a few months down the road, I'd be like, now I'm stuck with this car payment and this car isn't even that great in the first place. I bought a new cell phone and I had the same experience. That's what I mean by it was short-lived. So I feel like sometimes also when we find ourselves in a rut, we're like looking for something. We're looking for motivation, something to look forward to, something to be excited about, And when we're in a rut, that's really hard to find. And so sometimes what do we end up doing? We end up buying things as sort of a substitute for excitement, right? Like if I can buy something and have it, then I can be excited about this thing that I just bought. We can overeat or overindulge, even in drinking alcohol. That certainly was my path. I would just get so wasted on the weekends, and then I don't know, maybe that was residual from my college days, but I think that drinking did, like, I feel like I was using drinking to try to make it better. I ended up trying to make plans for a better, brighter future. I would make plans to buy a house, again, buying things, which, by the way, my shadow comfort is totally shopping. Like, I know this, it's something I've been working through, and I'm aware of it, and I've never gotten really financially in over my head, but I could definitely see where I was headed down that path during that time, because I didn't have a lot of money, and I was really relying on shopping and getting new things to fill that void, sort of. And so I would make plans to buy a house or buy a duplex and then rent out the other side, or, just other plans to get me out of the rut. And I was feeling like I needed something. And so, again, this is my own theory, but I think that there is a dopamine link here. And so I'm going to describe what dopamine is like, what it does, and then what it feels like when we don't have it. And then you tell me if you think there's a link too. So dopamine is this neurochemical. It is in our brain, and it tells us that this is the motivation molecule. It makes us get out of bed. It makes us look forward to the future, get excited about things. We release dopamine when things are literally better than expected, when we stumble upon things and we're like, oh, that was better than I thought it would be. And so that better than expected, that dopamine link, that dopamine makes us feel good. And so we are engineered, it tells our bodies and our brains to go to that spot again in order to experience that again. Just a quick side note, that's totally evolutionarily beneficial to us, because think about if I'm hungry and I'm foraging and I need food, I need to hunt for my survival, and I stumble upon a big herd of whatever that I can hunt, or I stumble upon all of these wild berries, that's better than expected. I'm geared. The dopamine that's released is telling me to go back to that spot so that I can get more and I can survive. Dopamine is also responsible for dreaming, envisioning, and planning, and it's what allows us to imagine a better, brighter future. It keeps us getting up in the morning. It keeps us going. It keeps us looking forward to something so that we can continue to improve our lives, and not just improve our lives, but at the base of it, survive. And so some substances actually can hijack our dopamine system. Some substances have this ability to kind of go into our receptors and release or keep dopamine in our system for longer. And these substances are things like sugar, alcohol, cocaine. Another thing about dopamine, another characteristic, is that it sort of operates on this law of diminishing returns. So what gave me this huge dopamine hit, dopamine feels really good. What gave me this huge dopamine hit eventually is going to lose its luster after a while. That's how motivation works. If I were totally content all the time, what motivation would I have to seek something new, or to improve, or to get up and go search out a new spot for new berries or a new hunting location? I don't have that much motivation to do that. And so that's like the dopamine system is literally geared to get us off of our butt and go and motivate ourselves to do something more. And so if this is dopamine's job, then it would make sense that it diminishes over time so that I am excited, or I get more motivated to do something more. And so it sort of operates on this law of diminishing returns. That's not like scientific, that's my own interpretation. But if you think about like, what does this feel like in practical sense? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You buy this brand new car, it's shiny. It was this car that was super fancy for me at the time, and I bought it, and like I said, it was a few months later, and then I was over it. Basically, I was over it, and I still had this car payment. And so this happens still when we buy new things. We buy it, we're really excited, but then we get accustomed to it, and then it stops being so cool. It stops giving us that same reward as when we first purchased it. Also, of course, like I said, the dopamine looks to the future. It'll be better when. Dopamine works in a way where it makes you want something. It's like the want hormone, and it tells you more and more and more and more. And then when you actually get it, that's a different set of hormones if you decide you like it, right? That's a different set of things. And so you can apply this dopamine thing to love interests, all sorts of stuff. But I digress. That's not what this podcast is about. It's all about being in a rut. But can you see the link? When I talk about my experience and being in a rut and feeling like this the same day on every day, it's on repeat, lack of motivation, I don't want to do anything. What am I looking for? What kinds of things was I doing to try to motivate myself, to make myself feel better? It's exactly those dopamine type circuits that I was searching for, looking for the future, coming up with a plan, buying a car, or using alcohol as a pseudo fixation. I don't use food a lot. I don't comfort eat a lot, but that's definitely some people's like shadow comfort, you know what I mean? And so shopping, that kind of stuff. So anyway, all that to say that I think that there's a link, and if that's the case, then maybe the question then becomes, what can I do to increase my dopamine, or to increase this want hormone that is actually good for me, that is productive, that is what I want to do? Because I can get my dopamine fix all day from cocaine, but objectively, and I can look back at myself and be like, well, that wasn't really it. That's not really what I wanted my life to look like. Or I can get my dopamine fix by creating a podcast for you. And then that podcast episode leads to another podcast episode. And so it keeps like feeding itself. And I would say that that's probably the more healthy route. And I've seen on like social media, people say, I'm going through a dopamine detox. And to be honest, I don't exactly know what it means. But from an outsider's perspective, I look at that and my initial reaction is, no, I don't think that we should detox from dopamine. I think we should detox from unhealthy ways of getting dopamine, but dopamine is a very, it's evolutionarily in us for a reason. We rely on it, we use it. It's all about how you harness it. Water can be poison if you drink too much of it. Anything can be a poison if you misuse it or use it in the wrong way. And I think that this is just kind of one of those things. So the whole point of this is, how can I rebalance my hormones in a healthy way so that I don't go looking for those unhealthy ways of getting my dopamine fix? So I have 6 things for you today. As usual, of course, that was kind of my intro. So what do you do about this? How do you get out of a rut? Well, the first thing that I have for you is to come into the present moment. So this one is honestly, this first point is not about dopamine. This is about your other circuit. So in this book, The Molecule of More, they talk about the difference between dopamine, which is like your future feel-good hormone, and then the here and now hormones, which are oxytocin, endorphins, and endocannabinoids. I think I'm saying endocannabinoids right. I've heard it multiple ways. Anyway, all of those hormones are the ones that kind of anchor you. Those are the hormones of like satisfaction. You can find love in this present moment. That's oxytocin, satisfaction, this feeling. That's what these hormones do. And so if you find something that anchors you in the here and now, you can sort of find a way to be grateful, and that feels good too. We need to make that transition from dopamine to the here and now, because that's what brings, I think that balance is really what brings our lives satisfaction. In this book, they tell a story about Buzz Aldrin and how he's so focused on the next. He went to the moon and he's like, what's next? And don't you know people like that? And maybe even you're like that. People who are so future focused, they're driven, they're excited, but at the same time, when you get that corner office, when you get that PhD, when you make this much, your dopamine's going to tell you need to make more. Dopamine's going to tell you need to be the CEO. Now dopamine tells you need to, what's next? And so it always kind of promises that it'll be better when you get there. And the thing is that it's not going to be better when you get there, because dopamine's going to make you want something else. And so when I'm talking about coming into the present moment, I like I said, I like to find something that anchors me. I always can find something to be grateful for, always. And then there's also this really good Stoic philosophy that I heard from Tim Ferriss back in the day, but it's basically like he practices living poor. And I'm doing air quotes right now. But this idea of living poor is like you only wear, 1 or 2 outfits for a week, and you only eat like rice and beans, and you literally try to spend no money and, see what that's like. And sometimes I think that's a good reset for us. That's a good reminder, because when we're in it, we forget what we've got. So if you're living in the 21st century and you're listening to this podcast, chances are you pretty much have it all. Chances are you live like a god, and we don't have a lot of opportunities for that to be experienced differently unless we deliberately go out and seek out those opportunities. So what I mean by that is we get so accustomed to our comforts and our houses and our nice cars and our name brand clothing and all these things, and the thing is that we don't usually have a threat of it being taken away at a moment's notice unless there's some kind of natural disaster. And the thing is that you need to go out and seek these opportunities. And so there's ways to do this. So you could try living poor, or restricting yourself, restricting what you eat or what you wear or where you go, the things that you get accustomed to, kind of like bring your baseline down to normal. You can also travel. Travel's a really good way. And like, don't just travel when you do this. Like, don't just travel and stay at a 5-star resort. That's really not what I'm talking about. Like, if you travel and you go experience stuff and get your hands dirty and help somebody else, that can be a very good way to bring you perspective and to get you into a place of gratitude for what you have, because we do need that contrast to realize what we have. Otherwise, it's just, it kind of becomes just background. It's just noise. You know what I mean? Okay, that was kind of a tangent. The second thing to do is to create. So creating something, dreaming up, that's a dopamine thing. And so that's kind of linked to your soul purpose. And so the question that I have for you is, what do you feel called to create? And as a person that is very type A by nature, this is about me, and somebody who is extremely, I would say I'm very dopamine driven, but I also was raised in this patriarchal society, and I was told that measures of success are external to you, and you should chase these things that the rest of society agrees that, you should chase. I never knew how to create. I didn't really understand that thing. And I think we need to divorce this idea that creation and art are the same thing. I had in my head, like, okay, well, if I'm going to create something, I guess I have to draw something or paint a picture. That's not what creation is. It's not, it can be, but that's not necessarily it. It doesn't have to be abstract or musical or anything like that. For me, creating is content. I love content creation. It's my most favorite part about what I do. I love sorting through ideas and putting this here and putting that there and seeing what makes sense. And so that's what gets me going. That's really exciting to me. I really also love creating spaces that are inviting, and I love optimizing my space, if that makes sense. Like, what is the function of the space, and then tweaking it so that it works the best for me and it's pretty and all these things. And so creating can take on so many forms. And what I would say is probably, I don't know if I said this already, it's probably linked to your soul purpose, what you came here to do. I was listening to Wayne Dyer YouTube video, and he's talking about how he talked to this lady, and she worked at hospice, and she said that by and large, the people who are on their deathbeds that are getting ready to go said the one regret that they had in their life was that they wished they had the courage to do what they came here to do. And as a person that believes that we all come here and we have a soul purpose, we have a reason why we're here. And that reason may not be readily apparent to us all the time. And we sort of figure it out as we start doing it. It's not a thing that we can look and say, okay, I have to do that. But as a person who believes in that, that is just a heartbreaking thing to hear, that you could leave this earth and your soul said, this is what you came here to do, and you didn't do it. And so that was kind of, I guess that's kind of like a little deeper than I wanted to go. But what I'm saying though is that creation process, I think that's what it is. It's what needs to move through your body, what needs to come from you. We get wrapped up in all of these ideas. I can't do that. Whatever I make, somebody else has already made it, whatever. And there are a million ways around that, because the thing is that nobody's going to say it like you do. Nobody has your perspective. And even if they do, they don't have your same circle of people, and those circle of people, are connected to you for a reason and all these things. But okay, I guess that's my little tangent on creation. Do something, start somewhere. That's what I have to say on that. Okay, I have to move on, otherwise I'll never get through these. Okay, the third thing is pick up a book, but then do it. I got so wrapped up in this idea, dopamine, ideas, excitement, new things, right? Okay, we're on the same page still. All right. So I would get huge, what I would call dopamine hits from reading new books. And the thing is that I would mostly read about them, but then when it came to implementing it, I wasn't doing it. And so I was getting a good dopamine hit by reading about or listening to a way to improve my life, if you will. But then when it came down to actually doing that, I would be almost so lazy about it. The thing is that you have to do things in order to figure out what works for you, and we can come back to your path and your soul purpose. You have to start somewhere. And if you just have these ideas, you don't get your hands dirty. Getting your hands dirty is how you figure out what works and what doesn't work for you. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you, like me, had a self-help book, podcast addiction, don't just read over the journal prompts, do them. Think about them. Start getting that going, because that is what is actually going to improve your life. Like, that's what's going to bring you to the next step, and then that step brings you to the next step, and that's how you make forward progress. Otherwise, it's just casting lines out on this self-help philosophy, this diet, this exercise plan, and nothing ever gains traction if you don't do it. It's just ideas at that point. Anyway, all right. So the fourth thing that I have is play. It's so weird. We don't play as adults, and even now I've had a hard time figuring out how to play. If you grew up like me in a family that prioritized things that had utilitarian value, did it have a function, were we working towards something? That is the way that I was raised. Playing doesn't really doesn't really do that. But again, maybe this is like a here and now hormone. This is not a dopamine thing. But if you start to play, you do get those here and now hormones, and then that play leads you to how to play better, and that's a dopamine thing. Another thing is I misunderstood the way that we play before. I misunderstood it for the majority of my adult life. I had this idea, kind of like creation. I had this idea that play had to look like me running around with some kids on a playground, or me playing Barbies with my daughter. And that's not play necessarily. That's play for her. It's not play for me. What the ways that adults play is in several different ways. I play by re-envisioning spaces, trying new things, moving furniture around, realizing like, okay, that works here, that works better there, figuring these things out. That's the way that I play. I'm literally playing with it. I play in the same way there's like content creation. Play with the way that I structure things, the way I frame things, the way that I figure it out. For some people, playing could be collecting different action figures. I don't know. Playing can, if you're like a collector, if that's what you really love to do, for some people like my husband, his version of playing is making Excel spreadsheets. He's like really scary kind of good at it, but this is what he loves to do. He gets into it. And so I think that playing it's so much more. It's getting in the flow. It's losing yourself. It's losing your sense of time. You're totally immersed in whatever you're doing. And then you get to try new things. You get to see what one works better. You're playing with it. That's sort of an adult version of play. And so maybe I would encourage you this week to look at how you play. What is your version of play? And then spend more time doing that. It doesn't have to be all work. Okay, the fifth thing that I have is embark on journeys that have endless potential. Sometimes we trap ourselves into this mindset of when I get there, and that's a very dopamine type of mindset. I've been talking about this the whole time. When I get that promotion, when I earn that degree, when I have the kids, when I find the love of my life, when I move, when I have all this stuff, we get trapped in this mindset of when this happens. And the thing is, if you ever see something as having a destination or an end date, unless you can find gratitude in that gratitude or activate those here and now hormones, you're bound to get in a rut when you get there. And that's what I mean by, is it in alignment? Is this what I really want to do? Is this what is going to make my soul happy? And if it is, then it's worth pursuing, because then when you get there, you're going to be satisfied. You can take that. Alignment is something that you get there and then you find something like it's progress. It keeps moving you on the path. When it's not in alignment, you're going to pursue something. And then once you pursue it, you're going to get there and be like looking around like, okay, either I'm not satisfied, what's next? That's the only thing that's going to make me happy, or I have to go on a different direction, or I'm not actually making progress in any direction because I'm moving. Unless, of course, you're enjoying it while you're getting there, then it doesn't matter if you're making progress or not. But I do think that that's what it means to be in alignment, to pursue things that you actually want to pursue, that your soul is so excited to pursue, and that when you get there, you're going to look back and be like, I cannot believe this is my life. And I think that's another, this is how I know that I'm living in alignment by and large. So on the whole of it, I can look at my life, actually every single day I wake up and I say to myself, I cannot believe this is my life. I cannot believe it in the way that it's, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. How lucky am I? So that's a long way of saying do things that have endless potential. If that's for you, if you like to travel, that's a good way. Having kids has endless potential. Finding the man of your dreams, doing the work, starting your business, creating beautiful things, those are things with endless potential. But like I said, with anything, this is internal. If you're looking for the person, man or woman of your dreams, and you see that as a destination, that's like a place where you're going to get to, and then all the problems are going to solve itself. Well, that's not, then you're probably going to end up, first off, you're probably going to end up settling for whoever comes in your life, and that's not really what you wanted. But if you dream it up, That's what I did with my marriage. Like, dreamt it up. I said, this is what I want. And then all of a sudden I found him. But that's the thing. Anytime you see something as something outside of you that's going to cure you and you're just chasing that, then that is time for it's time for a reevaluation. If you see travel as being able to fix your rut, then maybe you reevaluate. But if your travel is an opportunity for you to reconnect with yourself and find out what you really want, then that's probably more worthwhile. Does that make sense? Okay, so the fifth one that I have, the last one, did I say I had six? No, sixth one. This one's the sixth one. Okay, so the sixth one that I have for you is, and it's kind of what I've been talking about the whole time, but get more and more in alignment with yourself. Ask yourself, start calling things in. Start envisioning your life. I'm so glad that I know what I know so I can pass it on to my kids. But I think most of us were raised in a culture where we didn't think that manifesting or calling in a life that you really wanted was a thing. And so we sort of fell into this default life. And I think that's like the problem. Why people get into a rut. That's why I got into a rut, is because I was living a default life. I was living the life that I thought I was supposed to live. I wasn't living the life. I wasn't doing what I actually wanted to do. If you don't have any kind of manifestation practice, if you're not actively calling in something new that you want, that you've dreamt of, well, it's time to start doing that. I have to be honest. Think of your dream life. If you're looking for the person of your dreams and you don't have a list or you don't have an idea of what kind of characteristics that person has, you need to do that. You need to write it out. You need to get a feel for what it would be like to be in that relationship. You need to visualize it. You need to call it in, because otherwise you're just subject to whoever shows up. And to be honest, whoever shows up is going to be whatever your highest self thinks you need. It's going to be what you need, not what you want. And usually it has a lesson involved. Okay, I'm sorry. That was my small rant. Get more and more alignment with yourself. If you want a career change, don't wait for something to fall in your lap. Go imagine, what do you want? What do you want to do? What would fill you? And this is just in your mind, so let the sky be your limit. But if that's too much for you, just start a little at a time. Start making these tweaks. Look around you. Say, I would like this to be improved, and actively seek it. Actively go out and pursue that thing. Okay, that's my little motivation for you today. But there's 2 subparts to this, getting in alignment with yourself. Well, I guess 3. The first one is visualize, call in what you want, create goals that are reflective of your alignment. So imagine what you want and then create goals that get you there, like tangible steps that get you there. Don't wait till New Year's. Do it now, and do it on a frequency that works for you. Come and revisit them. So you make 1-year goals, you make 6-month goals, 1-week goals, a month, at the new moon, whatever you want to do. Personally, I would like to say that I do it every moon, but I've got kids and that I don't always have time. I do it on a 6-month frequency and I revisit it as much as possible. I have all of the things that I want to accomplish in 6 months and I revisit it, and it's a very evolving type of thing. When I accomplish something, I check it off and I add something else to the list. And this gives you something to work towards every single day. And you get something to show for it at the end of the day when you get to check something off. When you're like, I remember when this house was a dream and now it's in my reality. Okay. The third part to this is do the work. Of course, you're going to when you walk your path, when you are doing your I'm in alignment thing, things are going to start coming up. Things are going to start, because your external reality is going to be like, what are you doing? Your subconscious programming is going to be like, this is not what we learned. This is not safe. This wasn't the secure path that we planned. It's just a part of the process. You start doubting yourself. And I guess the question is, you're going to have problems. And the problem is going to be either you're in a rut, when you're living your life by default, or your problems are going to be working through some shadow things when you're living your life by design. So which problems would you like to have? And the work comes when you start to overcome these things, when you work through them a little at a time. And then you can keep pursuing the things that make you feel alive. And that is so much more rewarding than buying something on Amazon and being like, I can't wait for it to show up in a day or two, and then it losing its sparkle in 2 days or whatever it is. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, please share it with somebody you know, somebody who is in a rut that needs to hear these things. And of course, if I had one thing that I could tell you, just start doing something that lights you up. Don't do what your mom thinks lights you up. Don't do what your sister thinks lights you up. Do what lights you up, and then go from there. All right, you guys, until next time. If you enjoyed this episode, I would invite you to subscribe, share it with someone you know, and leave an honest rating or review. You can also connect with me through Instagram at spiritmind.body, through YouTube, or my website. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes below. This work is not easy and requires tremendous self-reflection, grit, and a willingness to be misunderstood, and for that, I honor every single one of you for showing up for your authentic self. Until next time.